Hi everyone, welcome to Digital Transformation within Government. I'm going to hand over to Paul, who is going to run you through today, and then I'll be back on at the end for any questions, if anyone's got any questions. So Paul, I'll hand over to you now.
Great, thank you very much, Chloe. So let me share my screen. Okay, so thank you for joining me. Today, I'm going to talk about digital transformation in government, or alternatively, the title of Designing for Blind Dinosaurs with Sausage Fingers, which hopefully become self-evident. That's why that other title exists as we go along through the presentation. But my name is Paul Bailey. I'm Head of Design for Spark, and we're the design and innovation consultancy within BGSS. And BGSS is the largest independent IT consultancy in the UK. And today I'm going to share with you a design journey that I've been on over the last 2 years, where I've worked as part of a much bigger team to deliver a new improved UK digital driving test experience for the DVSA. I'm going to explain how human-centered design was used to add oomph throughout the project. And I'm going to share some practical tips, which I'm hoping you'll be able to take away and apply to your own practice or your own projects. But first, we are going to try some interaction. Let's see if we can make this work. Okay, so you should be able to see a poll in progress. Which statement best describes your reason for coming along today? So we've got a few people interested in the blind dinosaurs and sausages thing. A few people looking for practical ideas and inspiration. Oh no, still got a few more votes coming through. Practical ideas and inspiration seems to be winning at the minute, with blind dinosaurs a close second. Okay, I'm going to end the voting now. So let's see what the results were. Okay, so there's quite a few people looking for practical ideas and inspiration. Well, hopefully I'll be able to do that today, because a big part of me talking about this stuff is actually sharing how we did it and what actually worked for us. So hopefully you'll be able to take some of those ideas and like I say, apply them to your own projects and your own practice as well. So I don't know if this space or this room looks familiar to any of you, but in many ways, this is where my journey started on this project. And this is actually a waiting room in Derby, actually, where I sat before taking my driving test quite a long time ago. And your driving test is an experience that I'm sure many of you will be able to recall vividly. The only thing I can personally liken it to is it's a little bit like sitting in a dentist waiting room, knowing that you might need a filling. But there are over 370 of these waiting rooms across the UK. And over the last 2 years, I've had the opportunity to watch all the emotional dramas that unfold there. Every day, there are a stage for people's emotions of disappointment and tragedy. And, you know, it's incredible. In many, it's a bit like a little kind of version of EastEnders every day in these places where people come in and all these different interactions take place. So out of interest then, let's have the next poll. So let me see if we can do that. Poll 2. How many practical driving tests have you taken? So by practical driving test, I mean the one where you're behind the steering wheel and you've got the person next to you who's telling you to turn left at this junction and turn right. Oh, there's at least one person that's lost count. Quite a few people have taken 2. Oh, a couple of you have taken none. Okay, that's really interesting. So let's end the poll and share the results. So that's interesting. So 40% of you have taken 2 driving tests. And actually that aligns with the national average, is that most people take at least 2 tests before they pass. And the national average, the pass rate is about 46%, give or take, across the country. So it's pretty much, it's very likely that most of you will have taken at least 2. There is one person there that has lost count, and I can completely sympathise with that, because over the course of this project, I sat in on over 50 live driving tests with real people, real candidates. So I can really sympathise with you. But when people pass, when they hear those 6 joyous words, where the driving examiner turns to them and says, "I'm pleased to say you've passed," it's a kind of life-changing experience for many people. This is a picture of a friend of mine who passed a couple of years ago now, but for him, it was really life-changing. It meant that he could commute to his new job, and it had opened up all these doors to all these amazing places that he could go to. And like I said, the driving experience, that experience is something, along with kind of getting married or going to university, it's one of those things that kind of really sticks in people's minds and they don't forget. So who conducts them? Well, this is the DVSA, not to be confused with the DVLA. They are the driver and vehicle standing agency, and they're the department that is responsible for ensuring drivers and vehicles may legally use the UK roads. And as part of a 5-year strategy, the DVSA has set out on a journey to transform into a digitally enabled organisation. And they wanted to adopt user-centred design and agile ways of working to deliver better products, services, and user experiences. Every year, the DVSA conducts over 1.8 million practical driving tests in the UK. And until recently, this was a completely paper-based process. And it had seen little change since I took my driving test back in 1990 something. It was really inefficient and outdated, and was identified as in need of modernisation. So you're probably thinking at this point, if this talk is all about successful digital transformation in government, well, what does that mean? What does that look like? Well, I'm going to try and play you a very short video. There's a bit of a caveat. Best case scenario, you'll get a quick overview of the entire project in 90 seconds. So let's give this a go.
DVSA is a road safety organisation. Our strategy is about keeping people safe on Britain's roads. We want that service to be modern, and this is a journey that we've started now with a test result capture using iPads.
When I became a driving examiner, I couldn't believe how much paper we used and how much paper we wasted.
All that paper needs to be stored in the driving test centre for 2 years as well. There's a high error rate where we can make easy mistakes.
We also had a lot of repetitive writing, a lot of postage. It didn't really work. It was an old system that we made work. We've been working with driving examiners from the start.
We had an early adopter network around the country, so every area, every test centre had a contribution to make.
We had twice monthly conference calls where we discussed any feedback that we had.
It got everybody on board because our feedback was taken into account as well, which was nice.
What really mattered is the 1,600 driving examiners out there were given the opportunity to see it, play with it, and give us their opinion. They're the people that really mattered on this project.
We've provided a lot of training to the examiners. We've got examiners who are, in their own words, are blind dinosaurs with sausage fingers. So we need to develop an app that they feel confident in using.
We brought the iPads out before the digitisation had taken place, and so people got some degree of familiarity.
By doing things like that, we turned the ship around from, I don't want to change from paper, as to, when can I have it? I want it now.
The first test that we used the app was a little bit nervous, to be honest.
All my colleagues were very jealous that they were still writing things out and I was not.
I would definitely not want to go back to paper. In the mornings, I can just sit down and have a cup of tea until I go out on my first test.
This is a fantastic legacy project that's taken away 20 years of old ways of working and brought us into the 21st century.
To be involved in the project and be now using them is a brilliant thing. I'm glad to have been a part of it.
So we got there in the end. Sorry about that, about the sound. So let's talk a little bit about this then. So that was kind of the glossy, video from all the people that were involved. But hopefully it gave you a bit of an overview of how that actual project went and the actual outcomes. But there were some other outcomes as well. So one of the big things, I guess, for me was that we managed to save every driving examiner about 15 to 20 minutes every day of mindless kind of copying and pasting of information that was being faxed through to them, which they would then actually manually copy onto 7 driving test papers, which were all carbon copy papers. They didn't have to do that anymore. And it also meant that all that paperwork didn't need to be processed anymore. So they were collecting all this information at the end of each day and packaging it up and posting it off to Newcastle to be processed somewhere. So we eliminated all the need for printing, posting and processing all this paper-based test results, and an estimating saving of about £500,000 for DVSA every year. We got 100% user adoption. So even though 60% of driving examiners were aged over 50 and approximately 1 in 6 classed themselves as learning the ropes on the government digital inclusion scale, 100% of driving examiners adopted the digital service, which for me as a designer and user researcher, that was amazing that we managed to make sure that we actually met the needs of this group of people. And we managed to create a much more accessible service for people as well with additional needs and assisted digital needs. We went through an independent accessibility audit, and all the test data that was being collected now was all secure in the cloud. So there was all these benefits. You know, we created data analytics dashboard, which enables service owners and ministers to make informative decisions based on live data. And more recently, we're actually nominated for a number of awards, and this month the project was awarded IT Project Team of the Year by the UK IT Industry Awards, which was measuring the project against criteria of how well the project had been run and how customer expectations have been surpassed and innovation, all these other things. I could go on all day about the impact that this project has had, but I get the question that you're asking now is, well, that all seems great, but what did you do? What actually happened on this project? Well, to understand that, let's take a look at the UK Government Guide to Digital Transformation. If you haven't come across this before, I highly recommend you take a look. I was really surprised when I first came across this. There's a link there on the bottom that you can follow up on. But I was really surprised when I first came across this at how forward-thinking it was. You can see the various stages that the government advised in terms of service development, from discovery right the way through project retirement. But the overall idea is that as a project develops, you're reducing risk and uncertainty. But in reality, transformation is not that linear and simple. It's a lot messier than that. This is actually the journey that I took when I joined the Driving Examiner Services, or DES, as it popularly became known. You can see there's me at Alpha, and this was a 7 sprints of 2 weeks. And our objective at this stage was to expand our understanding of potential users and the needs, test different ideas and prototypes with likely users, and to learn how to build or improve our service so that it helps users achieve the goal. And over that 14 weeks, we did a lot. You know, we interviewed over 100 people. We visited 25 driving test centres across the country, and we identified over, I think it was about 40 pain points with the current user journey. And then we designed, tested, delivered 8 different prototypes, iterating all the time. And it was really hard work. And throughout that 14 weeks, it felt like we're always only one step ahead of the development team who are constantly chasing our tail. But we successfully passed our GDS assessment, which we undertook 2 weeks early. And then just as the team really started to get into a groove, the alpha phase was completed and the project went on ice for about 4 or 5 months. The team that had worked together on this initial piece of work was kind of disbanded. And it was just one of those things, you know, finance needed to be sourced, agreements needed to be made, contracts are signed. And the project went on hold for, it was around about 5 months, I think. But that gave me some time to reflect. I knew we'd done a good job on Alpha, but I had a hunch, I guess, that by applying an even more human-centered design approach, that design could add more impact to delivery. So I started to learn what other people had done. I started to read up about it. I started to ask questions. And then those 4 months or so passed. And then I got a call from Lee White, who was delivery manager, who's now head of delivery in Nottingham, to say, you're going to be on the beta, do you want to come along? And I was like, yes, this is going to be great. I can't wait. I knew this was going to be a whole different ball game because it was going to be a lot longer. It was going to be 37 sprints, that's 74 weeks. And I guess for me at the time, that was the longest project that I'd ever worked on. But I knew there was going to be this push to go faster and to be really agile. And that was going to require stamina. This was going to be a marathon. It wasn't going to be, just 100 meters. This was going to be the real deal. But luckily, as I mentioned, I had a great delivery manager, Lee White, and he was willing to experiment a little bit and actually try some things that more for him kind of were a bit of an experiment, but they worked. So we did a couple of things before the project even started that made a big difference, I think, to the onboarding of a new team. And I started to think of them as the projects before the project. So firstly, we invented a new stage, which is called Alpha Plus. And the idea is this kind of stage is the link between alpha and beta, trying to keep those two things connected. And there was a really small team, which included the delivery manager, lead user researcher, BA, and a dev, which were all brought on just before the start of the project. And what this meant was that we were able to start to address feedback from our GDS assessment at Alpha, and we were able to plan user research activities for the first few sprints. We could get the backlog into a decent shape, and we could start sorting technical issues like hardware, software, tools, and get environments up and running. And this all helped to get a bit of a head start before Sprint Zero. Well, we're not allowed to call it Sprint Zero, so we called it Inception Week. We knew we'd have a big team all starting at the same time, and we wanted to make sure that they could start delivering value as quickly as possible. So I'll talk a little bit more about Inception Week in a second, but let's take a look at the team first of all. So this is the driving examiner services equivalent of a school photo. And right from day one, we were a co-located team with people traveling from across the UK, from Wales, Ireland, and even as far as Poland. And we aim to be on site in our Nottingham office on Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. But right from the start, we worked in a remote way. We distributed in terms of how we were working. This was back in 2018, so this is before the current situation. But we're already using tools like Slack and Skype and Zoom and Miro and Trello and Confluence and Jira to communicate and share work online. Now, one thing for me, which was kind of new, was that the DVSA had taken a multi-agency approach. So in our team, we had people from the DVSA right from day one, but we also had BJSS people, Spark people, and even another agency called Kanos. And initially, I had concerns about how this might work. Would there be any potential inter-agency issues? But there weren't. And actually, in many ways, the team really benefited from a wider knowledge base to draw on. And the DVSA, I guess, from their perspective, were able to reduce the potential risk of using just a single agency. So this is a team structure. And as you can see from the diagram, the team was split into two small multidisciplinary teams. One was called affectionately the Appy Tappers, and the other one, the journalists. There's a big story behind that, but I'll probably have to do another talk to explain it completely. Each had a very similar structure and skill set, and they were supported by a range of specialists, including the service owners, product owners, delivery managers, service designers, content designers, and all the amazing different roles that are needed to get through a GDS assessment. But I think one of the things I wanted to point out is that running through the teams was this kind of layer of human-centered design, or people that were focusing on making sure that we're adhering to the GDS standards. And they also were helping to make sure that we had a voice at all the tables. And this enables the whole team to keep a focus on those core principles of human-centered design around understanding and addressing core problems, making sure that we're people-centered, using activity-centered systems approach, and then making sure that we're rapidly iterating. So we had the team, we had the structure. The next question is how we were going to onboard these teams quickly and effectively. I knew from Alpha, and my experience on that stakeholders were really keen to get the devs delivering. But at the same time, we had this new team which were kind of figuring out all this previous findings and insights and trying to get to grips with the project requirements. We wanted to ensure that our focus started right with user needs. So we did a number of things to turn that Inception week into an Inception experience. So on the Monday, we recreated a driving test center in the office. We acted out the end-to-end experience as a, in a role play type scenario. We wanted the whole team to understand the end-to-end journey, which included multiple environmental settings and different ergonomical challenges. So using iPad to record outcomes in a moving vehicle, there were all these different things that we needed to try and think about. But perhaps more important than that, we wanted them to feel empathy. We wanted to remind them, if they'd taken a test, what it was like, but not only for them to think about that in terms of the person taking the test, but the person that was actually assessing the test as well. On day 2, we built a Lego City to agree our ways of working. And this is from a Lego City Scrum simulation, which was excellently run by Lee White. And again, there's a little link down there, legoforscrum.com. And this enabled everybody to experience agile thinking for themselves and see a Scrum framework in action. On the Wednesday, we focused in on GDS standards and principles. So we ran a workshop. We knew we'd have to pass our GDS assessment at some point. And in this workshop, what we did is reviewed the Government Digital Services Standard and ensure that any risks or any areas that we needed to address early in the project were identified quickly, and we had a plan in terms of what we were going to do and how we were going to do it. On the Thursday, we collaboratively defined our purpose, our KPIs, and our metrics. We wanted to make sure that the whole team knew what success looked like, and most importantly, how we would measure it. And then finally, on the Friday, we put ourselves in the passenger seat. We arranged for the entire team to go out and visit driving test centres. And this enabled every single person to speak to driving examiners, to see where they worked, to better understand the challenges they had. Then they all got to sit in on a live driving test and see the end-to-end journey for themselves. And perhaps the thing that had the most impact in that first week was this, and it was when people came back into the office and played back their stories. We heard of a candidate who had failed for the 6th time, and we also heard of the delight of a young mum whose passing a test meant that she could now commute to a new job. And those kind of stories really stuck with the project team throughout the length of the entire project. So by the end of Inception Week, we had a team full of empathy and compassion and completely focused on user needs. We had agreed ways of working and principles to guide us in everything that we did. And we had a clear vision about what was needed to be delivered and how we would measure success. But when teams knuckle down and focus purely on delivery, it's easy for the conversation to become all about story points and velocity, because ultimately that's how many stakeholders measure progress. And when your project is 74 weeks long, how can you keep the focus on what really adds value? How can you help teams avoid that meh zone feeling whilst maintaining a constant momentum? So I'm going to talk a little bit about that now. So to understand this, let's first talk a little bit about duo track delivery. So in this diagram, you can see the 2 streams of activity focused on delivery. In the top track, you've got discovery, and this is focused on creating the right design at the team's product or feature level. And it's about testing and designing the thing so that it's ready to be built. Now below that is a delivery track, which is usually where the larger resources cost in the team. If you look at the balance of developers to the rest of the teams, often there's a lot more people working in that area. And this is often focused on story points and velocity, and essentially ensuring the thing is tested and built right. Now, this approach can be effective in delivering features and products, but it can miss out on the insights that a human-centered design approach can bring, which essentially help ensure you're building the right thing. So in this diagram, you can see that we introduced a third track, and this idea comes from a guy called Dave Mulaf. And again, I've included a link here to a great article that he wrote around design ops, which is free, which is definitely worth checking out if you're interested in this thing. And he recognized that there was a need for a track at the beginning of the process that focuses more on user needs and understanding in a much broader context. And by adding a third independent parallel track to the system, we could do much more foundational research, helping to understand the broader context and also ensure the team not only built things right, but they built the right things and also stayed laser focused on user needs. And in many ways, this kind of track is about reducing risk. Without this, with a bit more upfront effort in understanding, there's a lot less effort later in rework and delivery. So what do we do in this understanding track? Well, firstly, we took an approach where we designed for driving examiners with driving examiners. We visited over 50 driving test centres across the UK, and we listened to the concerns, we shared our progress, we did interviews, usability testing, and most importantly, we conducted co-creation workshops. And this picture here is from a workshop in a driving test centre up in Manchester. I think it was about 8 o'clock in the morning. And you can see we went in and we purposely created spectacles. So we went in with giant post-it notes and scissors, and we engaged with the people who worked in those environments, and we asked for their feedback whilst updating them on our progress. But we made sure that any insights were then fed back into the project team, into the designs that we were doing, and enabled us to actually produce something that worked really well for this particular user group. I've mentioned this already, but we took a multidisciplinary approach to problem solving. The whole team had a voice. We had an open forum which was based on trust and mutual respect. We held fortnightly show and tells to share our work, and these were often held at the DVSA's offices as well as our own, and were attended by 60+ people from across the agency. We used a range of design thinking activities and methods to engage, from facilitating co-creation workshops to holding screen reviews with managers. And we had a whole kind of thing about making our work visible. So whilst this looks really scrappy, and it is, it was almost like a campfire for people to gather around and have conversations around how might things work and the best ways to actually create things. And it meant that we could iterate this really, really quickly. In only 2 months, we used what we learned to build and release a familiarization app. And it wasn't perfect. There was loads of room for improvement, but we wanted to give every driving examiner an opportunity to see what the app might look like, to start to get familiarized with it, and most importantly, to give us feedback so we could take that into account as part of our iteration process. And this provided some really valuable feedback about what we needed to do to make the app even easier to use. One other thing is that we recruited a tribe of early adopters from across the UK, and they were purposely chosen for mixed levels of digital confidence. And we connected with them by conducting an onboarding workshop. We visited their test centres, and they in turn supported us by visiting other examiners and in their local test centres and giving them updates and providing basic training and advice. And they also helped us to iterate our designs more quickly by helping us conduct remote usability testing and enabled us to gather feedback and iterate much more quickly with a much wider array of people in a shorter space of time. And we did this by holding bi-weekly calls, and we'd update them on their progress. And this was a real gem to actually get that user feedback firsthand and have users working on our behalf. So our user research approach was we kept it very human to start off with. We started with a much more qualitative type approach where we were looking for stories that everybody could relate to. And this quote came up a number of times, but in a way it became one of our driving principles, so that whenever we would ask a question about our design, we would ask, does this work for a blind dinosaur with sausage fingers? And what we meant by that is that we knew that we needed to make buttons and things quite chunky, because somebody was trying to use this on the move, and not all driving examiners were at that point as digitally confident as your kind of average person in the UK. So it became a basic principle that we used to inform our design decisions as we went through. But as our project developed, we focused more on qualitative research, and we proved all those initial thoughts and hypotheses with data. And data dashboard that we created meant that we could actually track this information live and actually observe behaviours that sometimes driving examiners weren't even aware of. We made sure that it worked for everybody. We conducted a whole range of usability tests. One of my favourite was something that we called the Magnificent Seven. And this was a group of driving examiners with mixed levels of digital confidence. And we conducted over 100 in-car usability tests with them to evaluate their ability to lost test results in a moving vehicle, and to research the cognitive demands of using the app in lifelike scenarios. And this helped to inform the level of training required. And I think we had to analyze over, like, I think it was about 14 or 15 hours worth of video. But it all went into iterating the design of the app and improving it as we went along. We also had an independent accessibility audit as well. And we wanted to make sure that actually we were improving accessibility for everybody, not just driving examiners. And independent audit and the accessibility statement that we created helped us to do that. And we travelled a lot. We went to every single event that the DVSA was running that we could get to. And we listened to people's concerns, we answered lots of questions, and all of these things helped us to stay completely laser focused on user needs, whilst giving us a sense of progress and a sense of purpose. And as the team, working together, we weren't just completing story points and delivering code. We were actually delivering value by solving real problems for real people and helping to make driving examiners' lives just that little bit easier. And we were actually delivering a lot of stuff as well. So I'm not an expert in burn down charts, but my delivery manager tells me that this was quite a good one. So we completed the UK's first live digital driving test on October the 3rd, 2019, and it went without a hitch. A small cohort of driving examiners of around 20 was quickly ramped up, and by the end of February that year, we'd conducted over 500,000 tests. But when you kind of get to this point, oh yes, we got some great feedback from GDS as well, who were really pleased with the work that we'd done. But the project was coming to an end at that point. We couldn't go on forever, and the whole idea was helping the DVSA to improve their skills and experience. So one of the things that we were thinking about right from the start in many ways were how might we shift that culture and create a lasting change. We'd gained an enormous amount of insight as the project had progressed, and we want to make sure that that wasn't lost as the project that was then taken in-house by the DVSA. So one of the things that we did, as I think I mentioned at the start, is we engaged, the DVSA were part of the project right from the start. They had people every day actually working with the team, but we also engaged with the wider DVSA and familiarised and integrated a team that was going to be taking the project on for continuous improvement. And we integrated them as the project evolved, and we helped them to align with human-centered and agile ways of working. We helped to upskill them in new technology, as they'd not had an experience of creating apps or solutions for iPads previously. And we helped to raise their awareness of the government digital service standards, so that when it came to their turn to go through an assessment, that they would be ready. We created a lot of robust and scalable systems and frameworks. This is an example of one, which is a design system that we created, which gave them an overview of everything they actually needed from all the various variations of the design. And we shared lessons learned and supported the DVSA's multi-agency approach. We played an active role in their service design community and shared best practice with other agencies working alongside the DVSA to help them achieve their overall strategic vision. And we worked seamlessly with their internal teams. We tried to become an extension of their internal capabilities, and we worked alongside with change management, staff enablement group, comms. We wanted to help the DVSA actually share the good news stories and keep the entire agency up to speed on the project's latest developments. And you can see here we've got Nicole, who's a user researcher from the DVSA, conducting an exercise where we had a visual impairment workshop, and this was to give some of the project team an idea of what some of the challenges that some driving examiners that are maybe a little bit older might have around using the iPad from a visual perspective. And we look for ways to raise internal capabilities and evangelize human-centered design. And in this example here, we are running a design thinking workshop, which was a drop-in for anybody at DVSA, so it wasn't even people that were necessarily related to the project. So after all that, a year and a half working this way, what are the 3 top takeaways? Well, I guess the first for me is that in many ways, the heart of successful digital transformation are people and relationships, not really the technology. It's key skills needed are more aligned to what we might consider soft skills, like, I don't know, creativity, communication, collaboration, trust, critical thinking and problem solving. And these are the skills that in a way make us all human. But I believe they really empower teams to perform. Number 2, I think done well, a human-centered design approach can be the fuel to add throughout a project. I think it can help really to close the loop between that kind of initial strategy and the final delivery. And I think actually by starting with impact and thinking about how a project kicks off and making sure that you actually maintain momentum and creating a lasting change, you're much more likely, I think, to have a much more positive project outcome for everybody. And I think finally, you've just got to put yourself in the passenger seat sometimes. It is a bumpy ride. It's not a direct path, and there'll be wiggles along the way. If you're interested in learning more about digital transformation, I'd really highly recommend both of these books. The Lou Down one in particular, from a service design perspective, really puts things into light in a very kind of light reading, digestible way. But the Digital Transformation at Scale is a great book, which is written by a bunch of people that actually work for GDS. And it gives a really good insight into how you might apply digital transformation in a government setting. So that's it for me. If you'd like to learn more about digital transformation or just talk about human-centered design, get in touch. I'd love to hear from you. And in many ways, all that remains for me to say is, on behalf of DVSA, I wish you all a lifetime of safe driving. Thank you.
So have we got any questions for Paul? And we'll see if he can answer them for you. Thank you, Paul. That was a great talk. How would you approach your alpha differently, knowing what you know now?
I guess there's probably a few things that I'd do. The first thing that I would have done is I would have tried to understand the broader context earlier. So I didn't really, going into alpha, it was very much, I think it was only my second day at BGSS. So I kind of started one day and the next day, right, straight into the project, kicking off, go. And ideally, I would have had built up a bit more of understanding of what the DVSA does and what their strategic objectives were, so that I could be thinking about that right from day one. I think in alpha, I did kind of pick that up as I was going along. But having that broader context is really important because it really helps to understand what the problems might actually be. So definitely broader context, I think, would be really important.
Couple more questions for you, Paul. So the next one is, how would you handle this in lockdown to get that understanding of the users?
Oh, that's a good one. So one of the challenges I think that we have at the minute is during lockdown, actually driving tests have been paused. So it would have been really difficult because we actually needed to see what somebody was doing with a candidate. So that's 2 people in a small vehicle. So I don't know if it would have worked to a certain extent. We have been doing research in other areas though, and we've been able to do that remotely, and we're relying a lot more on things like Zoom and Teams and collaborative tools like Miro to get people's feedback and conduct group sessions. And I think that's probably what we would have relied on if we were to do that now. Yeah, you still need that user interaction, but it is a little bit more difficult at the minute if you can't actually go out and visit them.
Yeah, so we've had that question very similar a second time. So we've got one more. Was there anything you wish you could have done that could have happened differently whilst you were working alongside another agency on the same project?
I actually really enjoyed working with them. So I think we should have probably gone out a bit more together. So the one thing that is missing actually, which I hope does happen one day, is that, as I mentioned, we've been nominated for a few awards this year, and we won one last week. And we did actually have a celebration scheduled for this week, but because the project ended in March, just as COVID kind of kicked in. So we've never had that final end of project celebration, and if we could do anything, I would love that to happen.
Amazing. Well, thank you very much. That looks like all of the questions. And the session will be uploaded to bjss.com/Sheffield today, as well as on the BJSS YouTube channel. And if you have any more questions, please get in touch. Thank you, Paul.
Great. Thank you.